All right, so we'll talk about these different classes of vertebrates. But again, like we were talking about, we're in the domain eukaryote. We are going to start by talking about the vertebrates now, the animals with the backbone. So what kind of skeleton did we say the arthropods have? An exoskeleton. Okay. So our kingdom is animal. We are in the phylum Chordates. Animals with a backbone and a spinal cord. And so arthropods had an exoskeleton. Vertebrates have what we call an endoskeleton, an inside skeleton. These are animals with bones inside of them. Like we said, there's 5 classes. There's fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. All of those organisms have bones. They all have a spinal cord protected by these bones called vertebrae. And we're going to go in order of evolution. So the first vertebrates that had evolved on Earth were fish. So we'll start today by talking a little bit about fish. Yes. All right, so let's talk about the fish today. So within fish, there's actually 3 different types of fish. There's one type of fish called the jawless fish. These are some scary things. This is the mouth of a lamprey. A lamprey is a jawless fish. It doesn't have a mouth that opens and closes like you would think of a typical fish. It has this round mouth. It has no jaw. And this fish is a parasite. Okay? What this fish does is it attaches to usually another fish. And it uses those rows of sharp teeth. Its tongue looks like a drill bit. It has all these teeth on it. And basically, it suctions onto the side of another fish, drills a hole into it, and then it stays attached, and it's a parasite. It lives off of the blood of that fish. But it's not like a leech in which it doesn't fill up and detach, it stays attached. And as the fish swims, this lamprey is attached to it, living off of its blood. When I was in college, so I have a bunch of stories I'll probably tell you about from my college days, when I took ichthyology. Ichthyology is the study of fish. And so we had to go out on a fishing boat on Lake Champlain. And it was one of those boats where you put the nets in the water and then the motors winch them on and you dump the fish over and we looked at them because we were studying fish. And one of the fish we caught was a lamprey like this. Okay? It's long, it's like an eel, it's got a narrow, thin body. It's got this mouth and this tongue that goes. And my professor, he took it, he had like a rubber apron on, because we were looking at all the fish, and all fish guts all over. And he put the lamprey on his apron and it suctions on and starts to try to feed on it. Also, and you could just take it off, but also what we did, we caught big lake trout this big. And some of them, when we looked at them, in the side of them, they had a big wound where there was once a lamprey attached to them that was feeding on them. And so obviously it damages the fish that's being preyed on. It can make them very sick, it can kill them eventually. But those are the jawless fish. There's not many examples. Those are the first fish that evolved on Earth, were these jawless fish. Then there are the cartilaginous fish. Their skeletons are actually not made of bone. They're made of cartilage. So what on your body is cartilage? Okay, your ears, your nose, like the tip of your nose where there's no after the bone ends and the bridge of your nose. So that material, that's cartilage. And so cartilaginous fish, their whole skeleton is made of that material, that protein material. It's a little more flexible. And that includes things like sharks, skates, rays. All of those animals are cartilaginous fish. And that is the group you're probably most familiar with. You call them bony fish. They have a full skeleton of bone, they have a jaw, and this is most of the fish that you're familiar with. a trout, a bass, okay? Salmon. Those are bony fish. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So what is the fish's body covered in? Scales. Okay. The scales of a fish provide protection. They are sort of all overlapping each other like the shingles on a roof are. And probably lots of you have gone fishing. If you pick up a fish, often they feel like slimy. Okay. That's because their scales, they secrete a mucus that helps them swim through the water smoothly, keep away parasites and so forth. Another interesting thing about fish scales is you can tell the age of a fish from its scales. This is something we also did in my ichthyology course. You take a scale from a fish and look at it under the microscope, it has rings on it. It's kind of like the rings on a tree. You know how if you look at the trunk of a tree, if you cut it and you see the rings, each year one ring is added. The same is true in a fish. Okay? In a fish, the scales grow a little bit each year, and so by looking at them under a microscope, you can tell exactly how old the fish are. So those are the scales of the fish. Now, one thing we're going to talk about with all of these classes of vertebrates is their body temperature. So what do you know about vertebrates and their body temperature? What are the two sort of options, right? Warm or cold-blooded. Do you know what those mean? Fish are cold-blooded. So what exactly does that mean? Okay.
They live like mostly in a cold condition.
Not actually. That seemed to make sense, but it's actually they can live in warm conditions as well. Natalia?
Their body goes to the temperature of the water they're in.
Yes, their body temperature, they don't regulate their body temperature internally. Their body temperature fluctuates, it changes. So if they're in a lake that is, 50 degrees in temperature, their body temperature drops down to 50 degrees. If the lake temperature warms up to 60 degrees, their body temperature increases to 60 degrees. So they don't regulate it. So we are warm-blooded. We're different. Our body temperature stays at 98.6, whether it's 70 degrees in this room or 40 degrees in this room. We maintain a constant body temperature. That's what warm-blooded is. All right, so fish are cold-blooded. Their body temperature fluctuates with their surroundings. Now, do you know what's an advantage of cold-blooded? There's an advantage to that. Now, with cold-blooded animals, it's a disadvantage too, because if a fish lives in a 40-degree lake and their body temperature is down to 40 degrees, they can't be very active. It's so cold that their body temperature, they basically slow down. Their rate of using oxygen and digestion slows down. So they basically just have to hang out until it warms up. Warm-blooded animals can stay active regardless of the outside temperature. But cold-blooded animals don't need as much energy. Because they're not regulating their body temperature internally, they can live on much less food than a warm-blooded animal. Another thing we're going to talk about with all of these vertebrates is how they reproduce. So they all reproduce sexually. They all utilize sperm cells from a male to fertilize egg cells from a female to produce embryos. But how that happens varies depending on which type of animal you're talking about. So first off, what we're going to talk about is fertilization. So where does the sperm cell fertilize the egg cell? Some animals, it happens outside of the body. Other animals, it happens inside of the body. We call it external fertilization or internal fertilization. Fish have external fertilization. Okay? When fish are going to reproduce, we call it spawning. What happens is the female fish releases eggs into the water. The male fish releases sperm into the water. So the sperm meets the egg cells in the water, some of them become fertilized and will grow into embryos. That's external fertilization, okay? And fish lay thousands of eggs at once. A female fish, some can release hundreds of thousands of eggs. Then the male deposits sperm on those eggs to fertilize them. That's called spawning. And then those eggs stay in the water after they're fertilized, and they grow into little baby fish outside. We call that their development. So fish have external fertilization and external development. The eggs develop in the water into embryos. They eventually hatch into the young in the water. Why do you think fish lay so many eggs? It takes a lot of energy to produce hundreds of thousands of eggs. Whereas if you think about like a bird, they only lay 2 or 3 eggs. Why would fish produce so many? Mia?
Because like now
Right. That's exactly why. Because really only a very, very small percent of those eggs will eventually grow into adults. Because first of all, the female release thousands of eggs. They don't all get fertilized. Not all of them get fertilized by a sperm cell. So you lose some that way. Then the ones that are fertilized, some of them don't grow. Some of them get eaten by predators. Some of the young get eaten by predators. So only a small percentage of the eggs that are released eventually make it into adulthood. Fish have lots of different adaptations that help them survive. One interesting one is a pattern of body coloring called countershading. Countershading was when an animal is dark on the top but light on the bottom. Like this salmon here, the top part of it is dark, the bottom part is light. What advantage does that offer the fish? Casey?
Well, from above you can't see it very well. From the bottom it looks like it's just the same.
Yeah, this is a common adaptation of animals that either live in the air, like lots of birds, or live in the water, because they might have predators on above them in the water or below them. And so having this light underside, if there's predators below them looking up, that light underside is going to blend into the sky above the lake or the ocean because it's light in color. At the same time, predators from above looking down on this dark side of the fish, the dark part will blend in better with the surface, the bottom of the lake or the ocean. And so it provides camouflage from both sides. And you see this in lots, like this bass is dark on top, green, and light on the bottom. This salmon, or whatever this is. This penguin, although obviously a penguin is not a fish, what is it? It's a bird, but it's those countershading. So it provides camouflage both from above and from below. Fish also have an interesting sense organ called the lateral line. If you ever look closely at the side of a fish, you might see like a faint line along the side of a fish. It's actually a sense organ. You can see it sort of right here. And that lateral line helps the fish to detect vibrations in the water. Do you ever see video of a school of fish, they all kind of turn at the same time? Or if you ever were in a lake where there's a bunch of fish, you tried to catch them, it's really hard to catch them with your hands or with a net. That's because this lateral line allows them to sense the vibration and movement around them and helps them move together in unison, helps them avoid predators and so forth. Fish also breathe in the water. They can survive in the water.
Who's that?
Mr. Arcuri must have been that. That's my cousin. His name is Gil. So gills are used for breathing. Gills are adapted to obtaining oxygen from the water. I like the gill picture.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So gills are adapted to take oxygen out of the water and to release carbon dioxide. So they work like lungs in a way. Our lungs take in oxygen from the air, get rid of carbon dioxide. And the gills of a fish, they're very light, they're very fine, they have a large surface area. And you ever have seen fish, watch them in an aquarium, so they're always opening and closing their mouth? What they're doing is they're taking water in their mouth, and then they force it over their gills, and as the water goes over their gills, they extract oxygen from it. If you ever, those are the gills, and they have a covering, it's called the operculum, that protects them, because they're very gentle, they're very fine, and if you take a fish out of the water, they can't breathe anymore because those gills all kind of collapse on each other. Because the water's not sort of holding them up, they all sort of collapse, and then the fish can't get oxygen out of the air. They can only get that oxygen out of the water. I don't know if you've ever gone fishing with somebody, you catch a bunch of fish, you might have those hooks that you keep the fish alive on. You know what I'm talking about? It goes in through their mouth, and then it comes out through their gill, because it's open. Like you can put your finger in a fish's mouth and out through the side, that's where their gills are. Fish have another organ called the swim bladder, which is neat. It helps them maintain their buoyancy. What does that mean, buoyancy? What are the first four letters? What word is that? Buoy? You know what a buoy is? Yeah, and like a lake, you have to like drive your boat around the buoys. That means float. So buoyancy determines how high or how low a fish floats. Inside of a fish, they have a little bladder. It's like a little balloon that they can inflate with air or they can deflate. And what this does is it changes how they float in the water. If the fish fills up that swim bladder with lots of air, what do you think happens to its floating? It rises in the water, it can swim higher in the water. It's kind of like if you had a beach ball. You know, if you have a beach ball, you're playing with it in the pool, and it's completely filled with air, you ever try and hold it under the water? Right, then it pops up, smash you in the face. Okay? It's that buoyancy is because of that air that fills it. What if you like take half the air out of it? Yeah, you could hold it lower in the water because there's less buoyancy. And fish do that. They adjust that swim bladder. If they need to sink deeper in the water, they'll expel air from it. So it's not as full and they sink lower. Or if you ever been trying to like float in the pool, if you like breathe in really deep, inflate your lungs and hold your breath, you float really easily. But then if you breathe that air out, then you start to sink. Same is true of the fish in the swim bladder. It changes how high or how low they sink. Another story from my ichthyology class. We, on that same boat, when we were on Lake Champlain, we put the nets way deep in the lake. It's hundreds of feet deep, Lake Champlain. And we haul them on, we spill them onto the deck of the boat, and we're looking at the fish, identifying them. Well, a whole bunch of the fish that we saw were dead, and their mouths were stuck open, and coming out of their mouth was this little bubble. And so what we realized what had happened is we brought them up too quickly. So when the fish is 100 feet down in the water, like if you ever swim to the bottom of a 10-foot deep pool, what do your ears feel like? Hurts, right? That's because all the pressure of the water is pushing on your eardrums and it hurts. Well, imagine hundreds of feet down. There's huge pressure. And so that huge pressure is keeping the fish's swim bladder really small. But if you all of a sudden bring them to the surface very quick and that pressure is gone, what happens? The swim bladder, the air in that expands. And if it expands too quickly and the fish can't release it, it expands, smushes their insides, and kills them. And then it pokes out of their mouth. So what we saw, their mouths were like, and this bubble coming out, that was their swim bladder. It just swelled up because we brought them up too quickly from that deep area. And so they were dead.
So you call the fish?
Yeah. Another interesting thing I did in my ichthyology classes, I went electrofishing. So electrofishing is, anyone know what electrofishing is?
Fishing from
So you go electrofishing, you have this backpack thing you wear, and it's a generator. You have to put gas in it, you start it. And then you have these 2 long poles in each hand. And you put the poles in the water, and when you press the buttons, it sends an electrical current from one pole to the other, and it shocks the fish that are in the stream and knocks them unconscious. And so you walk through the pond, you have rubber waders on, you walk through, when you press the button, all the fish in that area float to the top, unconscious. And then you can net them and do whatever you need to do.
It's like putting our lungs backwards.
Yeah, basically. And then you can study them. Most of them just get knocked unconscious for 5 or 10 minutes. And like you put them, if you're trying to study them, you put them in a bucket, examine them, mark them, do whatever you need to do. And then after 5 or 10 minutes, they sort of regain consciousness, and then you can release them back into the water. But you basically walk through the water with this thing, and as you're walking, pressing the buttons, all the fish in that area just float to the surface. But you have to be careful. Usually you're working with 2 other people, and as you're shocking them, they like net them and put them in a bucket. But every once in a while, somebody like stumbles on a rock and falls in, and you have to be sure you let go of the electrical current, otherwise you'll be shocking your partner that you're working with if they touch the water. No, I didn't shock him. It wouldn't be that funny for the person getting shot. Although, here's another story. Lots of stories today. One time I was working with Mr. Arcuri in my house. We were doing a little remodeling project.
When Mr. Arcuri did.
And I was putting in a new outlet, and I thought I had turned off power in the basement. And so I'm screwing in the new outlet, and I'm touching it, and all of a sudden I got electrocuted. I was like, and so what would a good friend do? A colleague?
Laughing a picture.
No, he's dying laughing there. It's not like he's dying laughing while being electrocuted. I was okay, thank God. But yeah, Mr. Arcuri thought it was really funny. What a nice guy. All right. Fish have a simple 2-chambered heart. We're going to talk about for each of these types of animals, their hearts. Fish have a simple heart. It just has 2 chambers, an atrium to take blood in and a ventricle to pump it out. All right, that's a fish. Let's look at the parts of the fish. So, when we talk about animals, we use certain words to talk about where to look and what part. The head end of an animal is called the anterior part of the fish or the animal. These are like general anatomy words that are used in humans or any animal. Like if you ever, your ACL is a ligament in your knee. The A stands for anterior. It means it's the front ligament in your knee. Anterior means the front end. Okay. The posterior means the tail end. The back side of something is called the dorsal side. The belly side of an organism is called the ventral side. All right, so if we look at this fish, it's external anatomy. Fish do have nostril. Fish can smell. They sense chemicals in the water. That's their sense of smell. Fish have eyes, usually on the side of their head. They have very good peripheral vision, that they can see a very wide area around them. The fins, the top fin, like you imagine like a shark movie, the fin that pokes out of the water and they're swimming around, that's called the dorsal fin. The tail fin is called the caudal fin. The one in the front is called the pectoral fin. This is the lateral line, that sense organ that the fish uses to sense motion and vibrations in the water. And then the cover that protects the gills is right there. It's called the operculum, or the gill cover. If we're to look inside of the fish at the organs, again, we have the same sides. Don't worry about writing it again.
Wait. What was this one?
That was the gill cover.
Gill?
So the brain of the fish is up back behind the eye usually. It's pretty small. Fish have a relatively small brain. It's connected to their spinal cord, which goes around the dorsal side of the fish. It goes through vertebrae to protect it. Inside this little tube here, that's the swim bladder. That's the thing that can fill up with air to help the fish flow higher.
So like that popped out.
Yeah, that like swelled up, it smushed all the organs, it swelled up so much it poked out of the fish's mouth.
You pop it.
That's the swim bladder. The heart is down here. It's connected, it's near the gills, connected to the rest of the circulatory system to move blood around inside the fish. It has two parts, the atrium and the ventricle. The atrium takes blood in, the ventricle pumps it out. The gills are back here. They're behind all of these blood vessels. And again, they're near these blood vessels so that they can absorb as much oxygen as possible. The stomach for digestion, and then you have the intestines, which absorb the nutrients from it. And then we have the rest of the blood vessels up here. Arteries and veins, which carry blood around. Do we have time for one more fish story?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So, when I was a kid, here's my shark attack story. I was attacked by a shark. So, when I was a kid, we would go to Florida every year. I would go with my parents. And I was about 8 years old, I think, and my dad, as something fun to do when we were in Florida, decided to take me deep sea fishing.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we went on this boat, this big boat, took us out far in the ocean, so you can't even see the shore anymore. And we were fishing. And, there's about 20 people on the boat. There's like a crew of people sailing the boat, helping with the fishing and stuff. We were just fishing with poles and stuff, and that was fine. People were we didn't catch anything, but people were catching fish. But then on this boat, every trip out they took, what they would do is they have like a little drawing. And they put everyone's name in like a container and pulled one out. And whoever won the drawing, they got to fish with live bait. So they had like some actual fish that they would put on the hook and that you could catch larger fish when you were using the live bait. So my dad and I, we won the drawing, so we got to fish with the live bait. So they get it all set for us, and they hook it on our poles and cast them out. So we're kind of just fishing there. We have the live bait, so we're hoping we're going to catch a big fish. And I was holding the pole, and all of a sudden we caught something. I could feel it. And so I'm like trying to reel it in. I'm only 8 years old, and I can hardly reel it in, whatever. So my dad gets he's reeling it. And then all of a sudden, like the pole is like bending in half, like something really big is pulling it down. So we're like trying to fight with it. We can't do anything. So the crew guys come and they realize we have some big fish because it's really pulling on this pole. We can't get it in. So they help us, and we're reeling it in and reeling it in. And it gets closer and closer. Finally, we get it close, and we look in the water, and it is. You can see the fin above the water. It's a shark we've caught, like a big shark. So we get it there, and they help us. Basically, they took over. They're like, okay, you guys were here. So they take over. They reel it in, get it close, and so it's like it was bigger than me. It was as an 8-year-old, and it was a hammerhead shark. So it had the eyes on the side, so really scary. So they get it this side, but they can't like reel it up like a little perch that you caught at the lake. They somehow have to get in the boat. So I have no idea how to do. So they go in their little tool chest and they bring out these long poles, and at the end of a pole is just like a hook. And so what they do is they like lean over the side of the boat like this, and they take these hooks and they just slam and jab the hooks into like the side of the shark, and they get them in there, 2 of them, and then the 2 guys together like haul the thing on board. So now the shark, it's a hammerhead shark. It's got 2 scary eyes. It's got a huge mouth. It's bigger than me. It weighs like 100 pounds. And now it's got 2 holes in the side of it. And so blood is pouring out of these 2 holes, and it's really mad. And so they haul it onto the deck of the boat, and now I'm scared, so I'm crying. There's a big shark chasing me. And I'm running down the deck of the boat, and this thing is like flopping around, chasing me down the deck of the boat. Right, so I'm running away crying. And so somehow they have to like end this thing. So next they go back into their tool chest, and what they pull out are baseball bats. And then they just start smashing the shark in the head until they killed it.
This is not real.
Yeah, and so it is real. I have a picture to prove it.
Okay,
I'll bring it in tomorrow. And so they beat the thing to death until it's dead. And so I was crying. It was the worst fishing trip I ever had with my dad. My whole vacation was ruined because I was attacked by this hammerhead shark. Yes, it was like, in my memory, it was like 10 feet long. It was not like a big boat. It was like, I don't know. I don't know. They asked us if we wanted to take it home at the end, like after we. I don't want it. It's happening. I think they were going to give it to somebody else on the boat. They were going to give it to the crew or something. People eat shark. I guess. But I had 2 holes in the side of it from the. It was scary. I'll bring the picture tomorrow. I found it at my desk the other day. Yeah. Yes.